After weeks of mounting pressure, Luis Rubiales, the president of the Spanish Football Federation, resigned. He was accused of kissing Spanish forward Jenni Hermoso without consent during celebrations after her team had just won the Women's World Cup. He's now been charged with sexual assault but maintains his innocence. Is his alleged behaviour symptomatic of the way football is run in Spain and beyond? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, after 17 days of unprecedented public pressure to resign over that non-consensual kiss, Luis Rubiales finally relented on a British chat show. But he did not admit guilt. He merely acknowledged that he could no longer carry out his work as the head of the Spanish Football Federation. The question remains, is his behaviour part of a sexist system?
It started with a kiss, as Spain's female football team celebrated becoming world champions, and ended in Rubiales stepping down as the head of Spanish football. Rubiales' uninvited gesture on Jenni Hermoso set off a chain of events. The footballer was initially angered after the Spanish Football Federation, of which Rubiales was in charge, officially played down the incident. A statement claimed that Hermoso regarded the kiss as, quote, a spontaneous gesture of mutual affection, unquote. 2 days later, she said she had neither seen nor approved the statement. Rubiales' actions were condemned at the highest level. Spain's Prime Minister criticised him, FIFA suspended him, and 79 players refused to play again while he was in charge. He was still in his job when the public prosecutor charged him with sexual assault and coercion. He finally relented during an interview with British journalist Piers Morgan. But at no point has he accepted he's guilty. So, is modern football simply rife with outdated sexism?
Well, let's meet our guests. Semra Hunter is a football journalist and presenter on Spain's LaLiga TV. She joins us from Bodrum in Turkey. In Madrid, Carmen Romero Bachiller is assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at Universidad Complutense. Here in the studio, Mike Buchanan, leader of Justice for Men and Boys, which is a men's rights group, and Sarah Bellew is head of communications and engagement at Women in Sport, which is a charity. Semra, I want to come to you first. From president to pariah, this has been some fall for Luis Rubiales.
It is, but I think a lot of people in Spain felt that this was a long time coming. A lot of people in Spain have very public knowledge and understanding of the history that is associated with Luis Rubiales, as over many, many years, both men and women have filed many complaints either to the police or to various courts about very serious allegations as it relates to criminal activity, sexist behaviour or misogyny. So a lot of people felt as though it's no surprise that this is how it ended for Luis Rubiales. In some ways, they feel as though it's a bit ironic that it was a kiss that took him down. But we have to remember that the kiss is symbolic. It's so much deeper and much bigger than that. It's not just about a kiss. It speaks to something much broader whenever it comes to the whole institution of the federation and the way that they had been running the show as it relates to the women in women's football. So it is quite a fall. However, I have to say there's probably still many more twists and turns to come in this story. I think it's far from over.
Carmen, just talk us through how big a talking point this has been in Spain, to go from the glory of winning a World Cup and to have all of the headlines being about a man kissing a woman in such a public fashion, unwarranted and unwanted.
Well, I think it has been a very interesting situation all over, because it has shown how, certain behaviours that maybe a few years ago will have us as something, common or something like that, eventually are not acceptable at all. So it has been like a basic general turmoil, especially in the in the media, but also in conversation on the streets, etc. So it has shown how the whole society in fact changed, and how lots of ideas relating to consentment and how sexual liberty of women are something that has to be defended. And I think part of this Se Acabó movement is enough, has to do also with how old women or a lot of women have recognized these kind of patterns as a part of the pattern. Because Sandra was talking right now about, Luis Rubiales as a man and how he was doing all those situations that were women and men, and it is true. But it has to do also with recognition of a regular pattern of inequality, and that's something that has been brought to the fore, and right now is something that seems to be unacceptable.
Sarah, can I ask you, are you surprised he clung on so long?
I'm really surprised that he did, and actually I'm pleased that he resigned and made the decision to go. But actually, I would question whether that is for the right reasons. I think really it was for PR more than anything. We know the Men's World Cup bid in Spain is something that's important as well. So, that's something I would question. But, as we've just said, I think the most important thing here to highlight is to show this was much more than a kiss. Luis Rubiales' behaviour was just deplorable. We saw him grab his crotch. I mean, what on earth was that all about? The moment the whistle blew in front of the Queen of Spain and her 16-year-old daughter. And then we had the kiss. And as we've just said, this was about exposing a much deeper misogyny. It was a power control on his part. And that's what we're seeing. And, not only that, it took away the moment of celebration from Jenni Hermoso and the Spanish team.
Mike, you're shaking your head here profusely.
I've seldom heard so much nonsense from the three ladies. It was nothing to do with power. It's nothing to do with a sexual assault. It was something that lasted for 2 seconds in the middle of a very emotional, very excitable celebrations. Something that the media have excluded, but we know it happened, was that the woman lifted Rubiales off the ground, physically off the ground, before that kiss happened.
So she was inviting him to kiss her, was she?
I'm not saying she was, but that was certainly sort of unusual, wasn't it? It was.
Do you think he's the victim in all of this, Mike?
Of course he's the victim. I mean, he was actually, the minute that the feminist witch hunt started the next morning, he was gone. He didn't realise it, and he put up a good fight. But feminists always win these, these confected battles. She was even on the coach afterwards. She was laughing and joking about the thing. The other female players were laughing about it. The idea that this was an assault is absolute nonsense.
Mike, you've 2 daughters.
Yes.
If your daughters had played for England and the Lionesses had won, and a man did that to one of your daughters, would you defend him?
Of course.
Really?
Of course.
Carmen.
But this is England, so that couldn't happen.
I'm sorry, but I think I cannot take that response to state that wasn't an aggression is really problematic, because it goes against what it means consent. Consent means that in order to engage in a kind of closeness interaction like a kiss with someone, you have to ask permission or know that that person is willing to do so. If you don't do that, and what you're putting on the table has to do with the whole idea of consent, that has to do with the no is no thing. And now we were talking here is about yes is yes. What happened is that if we are in the no is no situation, then all the blame is put on the woman that needs to prove that she wouldn't like the situation, and she has to be able to state very clearly and in the moment that she didn't want that situation. Just to put I mean, first of all, you mentioned that Rubiales is called by her, but it's not the case, but he jumped on her. But besides of that, what happened as well is that you are in a situation that you are celebrating in front of everything. How can you possibly deny or say something against someone who is the president of your federation, so far is your boss, and is responsible or allows you, as Sarah just mentioned, it's a question of power. So it means that you have an employment relationship with him, and your position in the selection will very much depend on that. Very much, very often, and we have been seeing that in a lot of denounces about sexual assault in different kind of forms and sexual harassment. What we find is that most of the women don't say a thing at the moment, and that it doesn't make that assault a less about assault.
Semra, can I ask you, Mike seems to think that Rubiales is the victim in all of this. What's your take on that?
He's absolutely not the victim. I'm really sorry to say this. And just because you lift someone does not give you consent to then kiss them. That is crossing a line. You have to ask permission, and he didn't get the permission, according to Jenni Hermoso. She's been very adamant that she never gave consent. And according to Spanish law, I'm also sorry to say this, it is considered an act of sexual aggression. It says it in black and white, and it is a law that is called only yes is yes. So in the absence of consent, it is an act of sexual aggression. It's a crime. That is why their criminal proceedings have been opened up, and he could face very serious and real consequences, anywhere between paying a fine or going up to prison for 5 years. And I think it speaks to a wider issue here, and I think it's important to state that in Spain specifically, so many people, almost the vast majority of Spanish society, all the way from the people on the streets through to the government, they've been in Jenni Hermoso's corner. They have been supporting her. Even the men in the media have been speaking up about this and saying, you know what? We were wrong when we initially supported Luis Rubiales because we didn't understand. Now that we're having a conversation about this, we are owning up to our mistakes. We're owning up to the fact that sexism and misogyny and machismo is normalized in Spanish society and in culture and in the workplace. And that's why so many women can't come out and speak about this, because there haven't been the mechanisms in place for women to come forward and speak out against sexual abuse or harassment or violence, because they're often humiliated into silence. They're often made to feel that they can't say anything. They're often ridiculed or condescended. And we have to remember that in a much bigger scale here, we are talking about a patriarchal society whereby men in power for many, many, many years, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, whatever, have been calling the shots and been making the rules that society has to abide by. So a lot of this is so deeply entrenched in the way in which we are brought up, in the way that we are raised. A lot of it can be subtle, it can be overt, but that's why it's so normalized and why women have often had to follow and play by the same rules as the men if they've wanted to be successful in life.
I want to bring Mike back in.
Why they haven't been able.
Mike, do you accept that in time you're going to be on the wrong side of history on this?
Absolutely not. I think people are calling this out for what it is. I mean, for a start, Rubiales claims that he had consent. And that's, that might be debatable, but let's have that debate. The footballer did not ask for consent to lift the man off the ground. But I would like to say that what we're talking about here, and we've got to be very clear, and this might be in Spanish law, but feminists in the UK and Spain and across the world have a huge influence on the law. And feminists' narratives on consent are ridiculous.
Surely the woman had a right to win the World Cup and not get molested by some
She was
man.
not molested. I mean, that is buying into a feminist narrative. Feminist idea of consent.
I think this is as well. I'm really surprised, and honestly, I'm not sure that every position is just equally valid here. And you are just, I'm sorry, but you are not stating any fact. You are not talking about you're just saying things, honestly. And it's, okay, words are free, you can say whatever, but that doesn't make what you're saying more right, you know what?
Well, Rubiales finally resigned this week in an interview with the British broadcaster Piers Morgan. We can take a listen to it now. So Morgan got the exclusive. It was done on an English channel, speaking in English. This is what Rubiales had to say.
I love so much my daughters, and they love me so much. I'm very happy, and I'm very proud of them. Very, very proud of them. They are very near to me. About my resignation, yes, I'm going to do.
You're going to resign?
Yeah, I'm going to. Yes, because I cannot continue my work.
Sarah, so that's what he said in the interview with Piers Morgan. I mean, should he have even been doing the interview on a British broadcaster's channel when he's the head of the Spanish Football Federation? Surely this should have been heard first by the people in Spain.
I mean, look, this should have happened a long time ago. We've waited 3 weeks for him to hold up his hands and resign. And I think the important thing to note here is that he's shown absolutely no remorse and very little understanding for the reason why he's had to stand down. And for what we've been talking about here, this really points to the very deep-rooted misogyny that is so entrenched, not just within football, within wider sport and society. And I want to bring in a quote here, actually, if I may, by Baroness Helena Kennedy, who defines misogyny. I think it's really important to put this out. But she says, so misogyny is a way of thinking which upholds the primary status of men and the sense of male entitlement while subordinating women and limiting their power and freedom. It's about making women conform and stay in line. And that's exactly what we've seen in this situation, isn't it?
Mike, the apology was a non-apology. Jenni Hermoso, a statement issued on her behalf, we then learned she'd nothing to do with it and she knew nothing about it. I mean, he couldn't have handled this worse, could he, in all honesty?
Well, he was finished from the very next day when Hermoso decided to go for the victim card. And she knows very well that she'll now become a great hero, a feminist hero. She'll make millions out of speaking.
I'm sure he will as well, though.
On the contrary, he's probably never going to work in football again.
He's a multi-millionaire. He played in LaLiga
for years. He's not going to work in football again because he's been the victim of a feminist witch hunt. And people don't come back from those.
You describe yourself as an anti-feminist on your website. What is an anti-feminist?
An anti-feminist is somebody who recognises that feminism is, and I would say has been since at least 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention in New York State, the pursuit of female supremacy regarding, irrespective, regardless...
Female supremacy?
Yes, and
men have been running everything forever, Mike. Come on.
You've got to be kidding me. They've been in positions of power, but they've very much privileged women. And so I'll just give one example of the impact of this privileging of women. Abortion rights. 75,
well, let's not get into that now.
75 million unborn.
Incident. I know,
but this is an example of women in power.
No, listen to me. You're saying about women being above men. This is a young footballer who has fought all her life and got to the very top of her game, and the one moment in her life that should have been celebrated forever. You didn't see anyone molesting Bobby Moore in 1966, did you?
Well, the parallel is ridiculous. I mean, you've got to ask why has there been so much fuss about this? And perhaps it's because women's football is so slow, boring, and unskilled. If you look,
let's bring Semra in on this. Semra, you're passionate about the game. Slow, boring, and unskilled is Mike's view on the female game.
I would completely disagree. And I would actually say the women's game is only getting better with time, and not just in one area in particular. I mean, yes, the US women's national team, for example, have been leading the way for many years. But I think this World Cup was proof and demonstration that it is growing across the globe and the quality is improving. It is becoming much more competitive, and it's also becoming much more professionalized as well, especially in Europe. Some of the football that Spain in particular were playing was tantalizing, it was mesmerizing. It really was parallel to the Spain side that we saw in 2010. And I think it is fair to say that women have been improving. But again, this is completely missing the point. We're not talking about the quality of women's football right now. We're talking about what happens in relation to a man in a position of power, abusing that power with a subordinate, with an employee. And actually, I have a question for Mike. You call this a feminist witch hunt, but how do you explain then in Spain why so many men across society, all the way through to the government, why are they so supportive of Jenni Hermoso? Why are they defending her? I mean, do you consider them to be feminists as well? Because it's not just women that are speaking out in defense of Jenni Hermoso in Spain. It's pretty much the entirety of society.
I'm very pleased you raised that. And the reason I'm so pleased you raised that is that in the next few days, we will see an article by probably the most important female anti-feminist in the world, a Canadian, Janice Fiamengo, and she addresses exactly that issue. Her answer to that is that these men are doing it because they know that their heads are going to be on the chopping block if they don't If they support Rubiales.
I'm talking about across all of society. Why wider society, by and large, has come together unanimously to support Jenni Hermoso. I'm not talking about people in the government, I'm not talking about people in the federation, I'm not talking about people in the media. I'm talking about the wider spectrum of Spanish society here, because it really has been incredibly one-sided. Why do you think it is then that so many men across Spanish society are being so supportive of what women are asking for in Spain, which, by the way, it's just equality. They just want the same rights as men. They don't want more, they don't want less, they want the same. They want to be treated the same way. That is genuinely all that they're asking for.
I just want to bring in...
I'm just curious why men would be so supportive of this.
Semra, I just want to show everyone some photographs I took on holidays last week. I was lucky enough to be in La Gomera in the Canary Islands, at one of the most remote football pitches in the whole of Spain. It's a little village called Playa Santiago. What you're seeing there on your screen is the football stadium. And as I ran past one morning, overnight, a mural had appeared. And we can take a look at the picture now. It says, El machismo nos contamina. Chauvinism, macho-ness contaminates us, infects us. Carmen, how big a discussion point has this been in all corners of Spanish society? I mean, this incident has really shone a light on something that many women in Spain have wanted to talk about for a long time. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I think this conversation has been going on for a long time. It's not, and the proof is that this situation has brought this kind of consensual response throughout the society, as we have been seeing. In fact, what happened is that, and this is not in... Some people have compared this with a Me Too situation, and we already had a Me Too situation at the time. But what is happening right now is that precisely for all the demonstrations that we're having throughout the years, and all the demands and the collective demands that has brought up in the society for equality in the long and the wide term. What happens right now is that people is not taking any longer this situation of chauvinism and this sexism that is actually permeating all levels in society. And that is something that has happened, and I think is the more striking and the most relevant thing. And I have something to say to something that Mike was mentioning before. To me, it was kind of awkward, because he said that women were ruling society, and that I'm sorry, but facts doesn't simply support that. I mean, if you go to a statistics relating, employment and rent and every other thing, from the presence in society, in politics, in the media, etc., you can see that there is a basic structural inequality based on gender in this society. And this is something that is going worldwide, I'm sorry.
I want to bring Sarah back in here. Sarah, just a couple of points from you. First of all, I'm looking for positives here. I mean, it was a wonderful World Cup. Everyone is now talking about chauvinism and macho-ness and male behaviour. I mean, just give me your take on, can we find some positives here?
Yeah, I think we can definitely find some positives. I also want to know what world Mike's been living in for the last 50 years. But
the real world.
But yeah, no, I think the fact that we are sat here having this conversation now is a positive, because, as we've said, it's exposed the misogyny and the deep-rooted misogyny in sport. It's bringing it to the fore. It's really recognising that we need change. And look, we need to put this into the context of the wider history of sport. It wasn't that long ago that women were banned from football. The FA banned women from playing on their grounds for 50 years, from 1921 to 1951. And it's not just been in football. We saw it in cricket. And actually, interestingly, women were playing cricket in the 18th century, and they were successful at cricket. And it wasn't until sport became organised, and funny enough, led by men, that women then became excluded from many forms of sport. And, it wasn't until 1998, as recently as that women were allowed to become members at Lord's, for example. So, this is all about really entrenched misogyny in society. Women are now, thankfully, we have moved on. Women are allowed to play in sport. We are allowed to play, but we are not equal. And as a charity, this is something we've been campaigning for the last 40 years, really starting to understand the barriers that women and girls face in society. Gender stereotyping is still huge. From the moment they're born, little girls are stereotyped. They're told to be clean, to be kind, not to get dirty. Behaviours that are very much at odds with sport. If we look at team sport, for example, there's some figures that we came out with this year as a charity that 860,000 fewer girls than boys are playing team sport. Now, team sport teaches leadership, it teaches resilience, it teaches communications, all of these things that girls need to be able to thrive in the world of business, in government, in sport, yet they're being denied. And they're being denied because they were born girls and not boys. And that's something we need to look into and we need to tackle.
Sarah, Mike, Semra and Carmen, thank you all very much for your opinions. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me and the Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.